Justin Haywood, Forever Autumn on BBC Radio Lancashire this afternoon. A very good afternoon to you, with you through till 4 o'clock today, and then Gary Hickson taking over through until 7, including the roundup of the day's sport from 6 o'clock. Now, upon retirement, my next guest decided to draw upon his 30 years experience in the police force and start a whole new career as a crime writer. And Roger A. Price has certainly no shortage of experiences, that's for sure. His work on the National Crime Squad has taken him across Europe and to the Far East, where he's worked on many murder investigations and other serious crimes. Here in the Northwest, he reached the rank of Detective Inspector and led a covert unit which ultimately received local and national acclaim for its success in engaging those who openly sold Class A drugs such as heroin and crack cocaine. His debut novel, By Their Rules, is out now. I'm pleased to say he joins me in the studio to tell us more. Welcome along, Roger. An amazing career.
Good afternoon.
Amazing career in the police force.
It sounds even better than it was there when you listened to it play.
Good build-up for you.
It was a great build-up, yes.
What about your time over those 30 years then? Reflection on those 30 years. Did it go quickly?
Very quickly, yes, and towards the end even quicker the more you get towards the end. About 32 years in total I did, and I've been very lucky really. I've served all over the place, all over Lancashire and beyond, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in some high profile murder investigations, and on the National Crime Squad you got involved in a lot of high level investigations into national and international criminals. So it's from that sort of background that I've drawn from in my crime writing.
And you've been commended 4 times for your work.
Apparently so, yes.
Is that a special presentation? Do you go somewhere special with that, or is it simply the Chief Constable giving you the award?
I would never say simply the Chief Constable, but yes, you received your awards from the Chief, that's right.
And it's a big sort of celebration, is it?
Yes, it's just one of those things, isn't it? It's nice to have your efforts respected in that way, you know.
I referred there to a drugs operation in the intro. It was the Nimrod operation, wasn't it?
That's where I ended my time, yes. My last sort of 4 or 5 years was in charge of the Operation Nimrod up at Rumford headquarters, all across the county, as you're no doubt aware yourself, and still going strong, which is always nice to see, especially in these times of cuts, etc. It's still there and still delivering. Yeah.
Is this sometimes where you see on the TV early morning raids where the police go in?
That's right.
I mean, you're not sure what you're going to see and meet the other side of those doors.
Well, a lot of work is done in the months building up to those arrest stage. You know, where a lot of covert tactics are employed to gather the evidence against the individual. So hopefully the sort of cherry on the cake is filling the collar really, and they've got nowhere to go from there.
How much of your work, your experiences, have you incorporated into your writing?
Well, I guess the last sort of probably 15, 16 plus years of my service, that's half of my service anyway. I've spent on drug squads, on the regional, national crime squads, and Nimrod, as you kindly mentioned. And in that work, you know, you do use an awful lot of covert tactics, and without going into too much detail, we've all watched spooks on TV. We all know that police have undercover officers and informants and these sort of things, and surveillance. And though these things are used quite rarely, just to put some bit of context on it, they are used rarely. It is the last resort often, and I've got to say that the justification case for the deployment of these very intrusive modes of investigation are very, very, very high, and the authority levels are very high, and it is scrutinised, which of course it should be in a free democratic society. But all these sort of deployment of all these sort of tactics come with their own inherent difficulties. I was just doing a little bit of research this morning. I'm thinking about the police use of informants, and it goes back to time immemorial. It goes back to before Robert Peel's time. And I was thinking about the phrase double-crossed, and folklore would have us believe that the constable of the parish back in the 1800s would have a book with all the criminals' names in it, and he'd put a cross against the one of giving him information, and that particular individual started playing the game both ways. He gave him a second cross, knowing not to use it again, and hence the phrase double-cross. So it goes back a long way, doesn't it? But yes, it's from that, to bring us up to date, it's from there that I've drawn the sort of experiences to put into my writing, yes.
Have you let your imagination run wild with it?
Completely fetid it is, yes, completely wild and fetid. So, I let the reader decide which they think is born out of fact, or faction, if you want to call it, and which is complete made up nonsense.
We'll talk a bit more after the headlines at 2:30. They're next on BBC Radio Lancashire. This is Adele and Jennifer Rush, The Power of Love on BBC Radio Lancashire this afternoon. With me, Roger A. Price, retired from the police force after just over 30 years' experience in the force to start a whole new career as a crime writer. I think so far so good. Roger, you're enjoying it?
It's going very well, yes, surprisingly so, yes, I am, thank you.
Did you always envisage writing novels when you came to retire, when you had more time? Or?
It's something that there's always, I think, been in me, really, and I've never sort of found the time to do it. I know it might sound like a cliched excuse, but I think there's some truth in that. And then eventually when I left the place, well, I thought, no more excuses now, so I'm going to knuckle down and get on with it. And I started writing this beginning of 2011, and sort of drawing from my more recent experiences in dealing with sort of covert matters. I sort of mused that the rules are very strict, as I mentioned before, and what would it be like if the rules weren't there? And the scenario started to appear to me, well, never mind that, let's go a stage further and let's have no rules, let's play by their rules, let's play by the criminals' rules, which is where the title comes from. So that was where the concept sort of started to grow from, where we'd have this secret government department that would look at the worst of the worst, that's undoable by normal means, and our main two protagonists are sent after them, basically. I've got a man and a woman to try and attract both sexes of readers, because there's a lot of female crime readers and I'm getting some good feedback from female readers, so I wanted to try and do that, sort of hopefully widen the appeal of the book. So it revolves around a retired detective sergeant called John Burrows, who's in his 50s, and an ex-MI5 intelligence officer called Jane Lee, who's in her 40s. And because they recently, having left their both respective services, they're current, they're up to date, but they don't exist. They're not in anybody's HR systems, for example, and they're ideal to be hired in a mercenary way, really, to go after the real worst of the worst, and that's basically the concept of the novel.
So the HR system doesn't exist in your world, then?
Not anymore, no.
Have you always been an avid reader of crime in the past?
Absolutely. I think all writers are avid readers, and that's where it starts, really, possibly, yeah. But yeah, I've read all my life, really, yes.
And how would you describe your style then? I mean, some writers are quite graphic, some quite subtle. Where do you fall in between?
Gritty realism is thrown in there. There's a little bit of, you have to have some grit in there, I believe, to make it realistic, and also to hopefully promote some sort of response in the reader. There's no point reading something that's bland. It doesn't serve to satisfy or awaken the senses. So you have to have something in there. But I try not to go too far. I don't want to be too over graphic either, because that's just going to offend people, isn't it?
And how do you go about the process of writing then? I mean, do you have a favourite time of day or night? Do you make yourself sit down in front of the computer to type away at a certain time and you finish at a certain time? Or
well, I was going to say before, I've sort of handed in my handcuffs for the pen, but that's perhaps not totally true, because I have to handcuff myself to the computer, and it is a discipline. It's a lonely discipline, but it's an enjoyable one nonetheless. But yes, I physically have to just sit there sometimes and look at a blank screen. Sometimes you type 3 or 4 words, sometimes you can't type fast enough. And I think there's probably two main ways of writing. Some writers, they're unbelievable. They plot the entire novel and then sit down and write it. And I can't do that. I have the concept. I'll plot probably 4,000 or 5,000 words ahead. But that's as far as I can go. I can't stretch my imagination any greater than that. So I sit down with a rough idea of the next couple of chapters, and away you go.
And when you've done those chapters, do you go back to it, reread it, do you edit it, do you take words out, put words in?
I try not to over-edit it as you do in the process of writing, just get it out. And the ideas will occur to you as you're going along. But of course, once you've finished the first draft, you've got an awful lot of work to go, keep going back over and over it and changing things and hopefully improving it before it's fit to try and put before a publisher's nose.
And do you sometimes wake up in the middle of the night with, an idea?
Absolutely, they're the best times. Have a dictaphone at the side of the bed Because I think when your mind's clear, when you're just awoken in the morning, or perhaps in the bath, strange places like this, mowing the lawn, you'll get sudden ideas, and you'll go, with my memory, I have to spit them out before they go,
We'll come back, we'll chat a little bit more between now and 3 o'clock. We'll find out a little bit more about the novel itself, plot of By Their Rules, coming up between now and 3 on BBC Radio Lancashire. Womack and Womack Celebrate the World on BBC Radio Lancashire. Help desk in about an hour's time. A few things I need your help with, and we've got an Up for Arts feature as well. A new Scottish country dancing season getting underway in Pendleton. I'll give you the details of that before 4. John Gilmore
on BBC Radio Lancashire.
Well, we're talking to crime novelist Roger A. Price this afternoon. His first novel has just been published, By the Rules. You were mentioning the title of that a little earlier.
Yes.
Did it take you long to come up with that?
It wasn't the first title. I used 3 or 4 before I came up with that, and I realised that was the concept of the story, really, that they're operating not only outside the law, but playing by the bad guys' rules, so there were no rules. So that's where the sort of title came from eventually. That we settled on, but yeah.
What about the plot then? Just give us a little insight into the plot.
Okay, very, very quickly, the plot of the story is that the Prime Minister is getting fed up with watching really high-profile criminal cases collapse from a variety of reasons, whether a jury member's been nobbled or whether a witness suddenly disappears or whatever. And there are a number of people that are very, very difficult to investigate, and he sees this happening, and we read about these things in the press every day in real life. Fed up with this, the Prime Minister sets together an executive of 3, which are the Home Secretary, the Director General of the National Crime Agency, which it is now, and the DPP, and their job is to sit down and evaluate the greatest threats to society. Basically, there is no chair, and that they all 3 have to agree that executive action, inverted commas, is needed, and nothing else will do. The Prime Minister ratifies that. And then that we come to our 2 protagonists I mentioned briefly before, the retired DS John Burrells and the retired intelligence officer Jane Lee, off the books, hired to go after the bad guy then and remove them. And the tweak at the beginning of the story for John Burrells is that their first target is the reason why he retired from the force. On another collapsed trial, and he walked away, a little bit of a broken man almost, and his nemesis comes up again, and now he can have a go at him without any restrictions. So that's the concept at the beginning of the plot, really.
And is it set in the northwest? Is it set in Lancashire at all? It's Lancashire connections?
Well, there are. One of the characters comes from Preston. It's set in Manchester in the northwest, or half the book, I should say, is set in Manchester in the northwest, or half the action, and the other half of the action is set in London, in South London, around Dulwich. So it's a mixture of north and south put together there.
And the book published by Pegasus, very difficult these days, isn't it, to get a publishing deal?
It's
yourself very lucky.
I do. It took me about a year to get a deal, and I'm told that's quite quickly nowadays. I had about 15 rejections from agents, and I had about 6 rejections from publishers, so it is tricky. Well, I do remember my first rejection was at the age of 12, when I wrote an English essay at the age of 12, and the teacher wouldn't believe it was my work. She accused me of copying it out of a book,
dear.
And the hurt lived with me till recently, when I shook it off and actually got down there and started writing.
Was that your biggest rejection, would you say?
It's my longest one.
How do you feel when you do get those rejection letters back from the publishers? Does that make you more determined?
The first one hurts, really. You've got to run around and swear quite a lot and punch the wall, and then pick yourself up and ignore it and carry on. And draw from it what you can constructively. So sometimes you get some feedback, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's quite rude, and that's life, I guess, isn't it?
First one out. Is there going to be a follow-up?
The second one is nearly finished. I'm just polishing it now. I haven't sent it to the publisher for their consideration yet, but I'm hopeful to do that before the end of the year.
Same characters involved?
So, same 2 good guys, different bad guys. So I wrote it so it would work as a serial. But I also wrote it that it would work as a standalone, because I hadn't got a deal at that stage. I thought, what do I do if I don't get a deal? How can I write a sequel for something that isn't published? So I had to try and think about that. So it works as a standalone, which is probably not a bad idea. So if somebody picks up the second book and likes it, they can go back to the first without really any damage to their enjoyment, hopefully.
Got a couple of talks coming up. First is this Thursday, Accrington Library.
Yes, Accrington Library this
Lovely
Thursday.
stained glass window, of course, at Accrington Library.
Beautiful venue this Thursday at Accrington at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where I'll be talking about my previous career, my journey to publication that we've been touching on now, and also about the book itself.
And in future weeks, Blackburn, Chorley and Preston.
That's right, yeah, I've got Blackburn on the 20th of November at 7 p.m, Chorley on the 29th at 6 p.m, and then Preston House Museum on the Monday the 2nd of December at 5:30 p.m. But all the details of those venues are actually on my website, if I can mention that, Gilly. That's rogerapriceauthor.com. All the details are on there, including contact details for the libraries. I think they would like to know if you'd want to go before they arrive, just to get the numbers sorted.
And if you missed the website, we'll put it all on the BBC Radio Lancashire help desk, 0345 305 9000. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And best of luck with By Their Rules on BBC Radio Lancashire. News at 3 is on the way.